Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we have some news on the horror film front, which is a bit interesting. Now, some of these some of these announcements did come out of Comic-Con, but we're getting more and more context as the days go on. But at Comic-Con, it was announced that the 2018 Halloween reboot, which was very successful and got very good reviews from both horror fans and critics alike, uh, is going to get two sequels in 2020 and 2021 respectively, and they will be called Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Now, when it comes to slasher movies, they very rarely does it ever end unless it starts becoming profitable. But we've gotten confirmation on a few different things. We've gotten confirmation that Jamie Lee Curtis is going to be coming back for both of those films. That David Gordon Green, who directed the 2018 version, is going to be directing the second and third films as well. And we have confirmation that Danny McBride, who was a writer on that film, will be coming back to write the next two. Um, so we got news today that also Nick Castle, who played Michael Myers in the original Halloween in 1978 and who came back for the rebooted film last year, will also be coming back at least for the first movie. We don't have direct confirmation of the second one yet. But this leads into something that I find problematic in today's horror market. Back when the original Halloween came out, um, and a lot of those other slashers around the same time, late 70s, early 80s, they found a trend and they milked the living hell out of it. Friday the 13th, especially, there were a lot of Friday the 13th ripoffs that came out, like, stuff like The Burning or Sleepaway Camp, shit like that, that came out around the same time. That was basically the same kind of a premise, except they changed some stuff with the killer around, and they made some story of few story changes that really didn't change the movies enough so that they wouldn't get 100% construed with Friday the 13th, especially since Friday the 13th had Jason take over in part 2 through 10. Now, the issue that I kind of have with this is that I think it's a product of Hollywood jumping the gun in a way. I think it's big when you announce two movies like that will be premiering in back-to-back years. Now, I don't know if these movies are going to be filmed concurrently. In other words, it's going to be one long shoot that's going to be cut into two films. Um, or if these are going to be filmed and written, a little bit of ways apart. But because they're coming out in back-to-back years, that usually means they're going to be filmed concurrently. So these two films are going to be linked together, which is kind of the same process that Back to the Future went through, where Back to the Future 1 came out in 85. It took them about 4 years to film parts 2 and 3, and then those 2 and 3 were released in 89 and 90 respectively. So that's what it seems like is happening here, but I'm just kind of concerned in the way that I understand that David Gordon Green did a good job with the 2018 film. And I trust him from a horror perspective because I think that if you can do Michael Myers right, you can do most things in horror right. But the only concern is that slashers haven't really sold well since the late 80s. The late 80s was when the slasher phase started to die and people started to get into other forms of horror. In the 90s, you started with, more supernatural type of stuff. You had stuff like The Sixth Sense. You had found footage, which started up in the 90s with the Blair Witch Project, well, in the late 90s. And you had numerous other things that kind of took the slasher's place over time, and then after a while, it all started to degrade. The only really profitable slasher films of the 90s, I believe, was really mainly the Scream franchise, especially the first one. Other than that, I can't think of any off the top of my head that were really, really successful to the point where they spawned a series of films. But this is what Hollywood does: is they make something that's successful, which is what you should do. You should concentrate on making a successful film first as opposed to starting a franchise. And I've harped on that with Universal before with their Dark Monster universe, whatever the hell it is now. And it's the idea that you should concentrate on making a good movie first, and then after you've made that good film, then you can concentrate on making it into a franchise. But here's the thing: if Halloween ends, the movie Halloween ends, if that doesn't end the franchise, then everybody's going to say, okay, now we're just going to get another sequel. It's going to end on a cliffhanger and yada yada yada. I think the main problem with a lot of the slasher franchises from the 80s is they went on way too long. I mean, Jason Voorhees, when you look at the three major slasher film franchises from the 80s, you look at Michael Myers from Halloween, Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, and Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street. The only one that had a worthwhile last entry in that series was Nightmare on Elm Street, and that was because Wes Craven was involved in the directing process with New Nightmare. If it had ended with Part 6, which really the movie universe kind of did, if it ended with Part 6, then we would be saying the same thing. It's like, okay, you just fucked everything up for the last movie. At least the Friday the 13th series kind of went into comedy more or less. At least in the last entries, it was just like, oh, what hilarious thing can we have them do now? I mean, the last Jason X is in fucking space. So there's really not. And then Michael Myers, by the end of that original run, with Halloween 6, he's apparently the product of this weird cult that makes very little sense, and they're just hammered into the story and doesn't mean a lot. But all of those franchises dragged themselves on too long. Now, if this ends with Halloween ends, I think you could make it work. I think it's fine. I think that's what you should do is you should end it with that third movie and you should say, okay, we're going to try some new things from a horror perspective. Maybe try a different type of a slasher film. Maybe, try some other stuff. But don't drag the Halloween franchise on too long. That's the problem that it went into in the first place. And that's actually originally why John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, after Halloween 2, wanted to turn it into an anthology series to make sure it stayed fresh. And that's how we got Halloween 3, which was a commercial and box office failure, even though it's a fucked up movie. I mean, any movie where you turn a child's head into like a maggot infested thing of gelatin is pretty fucked. But the point is that there was a reasoning behind that choice for Halloween 3. They wanted to turn it into an anthology to keep things fresh, and that's what the sequels wound up screwing up with Halloween 4, 5, and 6, is it got stale. It was the same damn story all over again, and really 4 and 5 were kind of almost the same movie. I mean, they're really very similar, and then 6 is just such a weird offshoot that makes absolutely no sense. So I think if Halloween 1, I like Halloween from 1978, and I like Halloween 2 from 1982. And then 3 is kind of an oddball, and 4 through 6 suck. So if you want to carry this on, don't make the same mistake you made before and drag it on. And that goes also for the other reboots of Halloween that have happened, where H20, you did a good job with H20, and then you fucked it up on Halloween Resurrection, where you turned Michael Myers into a reality show. And the same thing with Rob Zombie. The first Rob Zombie film was okay. I don't think it was that great. And then the sequel was complete garbage because he didn't give a shit, probably. And everything just devolves into swearing rednecks with a Rob Zombie film. But that's my main message for this is if they don't end it with Halloween Ends, and if Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends are subpar entries into this new Halloween timeline, then they're just going to drag this thing through the mud just like they did before. And, I'm a little concerned just because they're announcing two films at once. Again, I think they're probably filming them concurrently, but even still, I would have probably waited to announce that there was going to be a third film until you were kind of sure that the second film was going to do okay. But that's just me. I want to know what you think. As horror fans, do you like the fact that we're getting more Halloween films that are in the same timeline as the 2018 film? Do you think they should just leave it alone? Do you think they should just let it go? You think they should just make Halloween 2018 its own little standalone thing and not add to it? And are you excited to see any of the actors and writers and directors returning for these next two films? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Again, I like to read them. I like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?